Well, welcome to our second chat with mayoral candidate Ade Olumide, who has graciously agreed to join us and talk about the issues surrounding all kinds of homeless issues here in Ottawa with Operation Come Home. So welcome. And before we begin, I'm just hoping you could tell me a little bit about the genesis for your mayoral campaign. What made you decide you were going to run for mayor of Ottawa?
Well, a number of reasons, but primarily is to restore competence and ethics to Ottawa City Council. Now, I'm not saying that there are challenges in all areas, but specifically to do with the police complaints process. I think there are a lot of huge issues there. Mind you, I will say that I am pro-police. I'm pro-police duty to keep us safe. So it's not that I'm anti-police, but there are, by my estimation, when I look at 1,400 sworn employees and about 230 complaints in 1 year, and it was 2019. So my estimation is we could have about 10% or less of the police force that are problematic. And so I would say good cops are in the majority. But we do have a small minority, less than 10%. And there are a number of problems with the complaint process, to which I have come up with a transparency bill of rights, a police complaints transparency bill of rights, which, after asking council if several times and not seeing that done, you say, well, you might as well jump in the ring and get it done yourself. And just to give you an idea as to what the problem is, we have a situation where so the OIPRD processes all complaints against the police. So some complaints they accept, some complaints they don't. But only 1% of complaints ever make it to a hearing. So we as a public, we have no visibility on complaints that were not accepted, or complaints that were accepted but for some reason didn't make it to a hearing. Now, why that is particularly problematic is that certain people have found a way to ensure that these processes drag on for years. So there was a situation where, there was a complaint. It took 4 years to get to the hearing stage. And then the police decided to settle with the officer involved so that the case would never be heard, and the officer resigned. So there was another case of a lady, and in her case, they said there would be no investigation. Then when contacted by the media, they said, well, okay, they'll have an investigation. But in her comments on CBC, what she said was she wished they had listened to her 15 years ago. So this is 15 years, no investigation. Another case, 4 years. This was a complaint accepted by the OIPRD. Still no decision. So there are lots of things sort of happening below the radar. And I am 100% sure that I'm correct. And that's why, and by the way, I didn't mention that other than the fact that visible minorities and indigenous people and female police officers are disproportionately affected. So when I mention female police officers, now I'm talking about the internal complaints process, because the OIPRD deals with the public complaints process. So what I've simply come up with is that council has the power to pass a bylaw making all complaints transparent. So they have a power to pass that bylaw requiring the Police Services Board to make all complaints transparent. And I've said after 120 days, because 120 days is the OIPRD benchmark by which investigation should have been completed. So if an investigation is not completed after 120 days, then the public deserve explanation. And I'll just quickly give you three examples of why what I'm saying, the fact that it has not been done by council is evidence of an ethical challenge. Is that in New Brunswick and Newfoundland, complaints are not allowed to exceed 90 days and 60 days respectively. So no extension. And that's because a complaint about a police officer is not a criminal complaint. It's just like a HR complaint, about your employee. So in those two provinces, there is no extensions. 90 days, 60 days, you come in with 120 days, you come in with your report. The second example I'll give is that the Ontario Privacy Commissioner, all decisions by the Ontario Privacy Commissioner are available online, anonymized, which is what I'm arguing as well for, that there should be an anonymized copy of all complaints. And some of these Privacy Commissioner decisions actually deal with records related to criminal proceedings. So they deal with a lot of sensitive decisions, but when it's all anonymized, it takes away the sting. And this is, anyway, so then the third and final example that I'll give is that there are about 5 cities in the US that have tried to do this complaints database to various levels. I won't mention all of them here, but Idaho, California, but the one that you'll probably be interested in is Alberta. So here is a group of academics that agree with what I'm saying and frustrated with government cover-ups decided to start their own database. But then they are relying on access to information requests. So it's a lot more powerful if this is done by the government, the municipal government. The provincial OPP also have issues. Canada also has issues with the RCMP. And this also affects some of the military complaints that we've seen in the media often. So as you can see, so you weren't planning to get an earful on this, but this is where because when I saw your text and you said you wanted to talk about the police, I was like, oh, great. So
well, and let's start there, right? Because do you know what Operation Come Home is? Do you know what we do?
Yes, I know what you do, and I'm very supportive.
So, all right. Well, that just means I don't have to explain it all again, which is great. So, in our context, right, homeless youth, and in terms of policing, one of the things that I think happens that creates a situation where more complaints might happen, where more misconduct might even happen, is that we have criminalized homelessness in a sense, right? And police are expected to enforce this, issuing tickets for panhandling, for trespassing, for loitering, for all these things. The police are the ones who have to come in and break up a homeless encampment when people set up tents in a certain area of Ottawa, right? They end up becoming the enforcement arm of the criminalization of homelessness. And I'm wondering if you think there's anything that the city can do in that regard, in terms of, you said you could make a bylaw to make the complaints process more transparent. Can you make a bylaw that says we're not going to prosecute these things anymore? We're going to handle them differently. We're going to create maybe some other arm of the policing that can do that without sending in cops to do these jobs?
Well, it's a complicated question, but I'll try to give you some broad strokes of how I think about on these issues. First of all, we should not criminalize homelessness. Every life is valuable, and we should work with everyone to ensure that whatever the root causes are solved. Now, I don't see that homelessness should be an end in itself. We should be providing supports in order to end homelessness, rather than saying we accept that. It's just like employment. Okay, we're always going to have unemployed people, but we don't, as a government, we shouldn't say that we accept any level of. We should be driving towards zero, recognizing that we will always have some level of unemployment. So that's what I'm trying to say. Now, when it comes to enforcement, I want to see a lot of changes there. One of the things I've come up with on my platform is that um, I see potential for savings of $18 million from the police budget. Now, I started off by saying I'm pro-police. I'm not talking about reducing the number of officers. What I'm talking about is that within the police force, we have sworn officers and unsworn officers. Now, the sworn officers make a lot more. So it costs about 151K per person. The unsworn officers, so if you take out the police budget from the city, the average per person is about 121,000, all inclusive. So a lot of the work that the police do should fall to civilians. Now, whether it's mental health personnel, as we've said, as well, there's been a lot of talk about mental health personnel, whether it's by law, whether it's social workers, but whatever the solution is, whether within the police department or in another department, where I can say emphatically is that I only want police involved in law enforcement, which means when there's been a crime, and I'm not talking about a petty, I didn't even know that panhandling was a crime, but let's just say, whatever the issues may be. I'm not talking about things like that. I'm talking about a real crime, like, break and entry. And to show you how radical I am on this, I don't even want to see police on traffic duty. Right? I don't want to see police on construction sites. So when I look at the entire, I think it's about 2,000 police force, I see a lot of opportunities. So when you ask about, dealing with youth and homelessness, and certainly, unless there has been a crime, I mean a real crime, I would like to see, and I would be looking forward to, I know there's various rules about what council can do and what the board can do. But I will tell you that one of the things that I plan to do is have mandate letters for each of the boards and every city department, where we will have broad strokes. I know there's all this talk about mayoral powers, but I want to get council in on it, because there are 80% of issues that we can agree on, right? So if we have a piece of paper that has a mandate for the Ottawa Police Services Board, where council has agreed that in dealing with people who are homeless, the police are never involved unless there's a real crime. And we specify what we mean by that, which means an assault or a break-in and entry. Then that's a mandate letter that's been issued by council. So I know that we have no jurisdiction to change the criminal code or things like that. But at the same time, the police chief has to retain the confidence of council. So I don't believe that the police chief should be bossing around the board or council. It's our city. We were elected to run the city. So we tell you what we want to see done. So regardless of the fact that, let's just say if panhandling is in the criminal code, and I know trespassing is in the criminal code, but we can pass a mandate letter that says that when dealing with homeless people, for sure, unless there are certain types of crime, police is not to be involved. It would have to be at the request of a social worker or a bylaw officer, or but at the request of a civilian. So I know that's a long-winded way, but just to tell you that I'm on the same page there. I think that a lot can be done, and the police should be focused on real crimes.
And what happens with panhandling, just a quick synopsis, right? Panhandling or trespassing or any of these things, right? Homeless people will be approached by police, or somebody will make a complaint. There's somebody sleeping in my vestibule. Police will come to clear them out. And often they'll be issued a ticket. Well, they have no way of paying that. They're homeless. So the tickets pile up and they pile up and they pile up. And when it comes time to get, finally, you've been able to get a house, you've been put into an apartment. Now you're getting the supports that you need, right? Mental health assistance, addiction assistance, whatever it may be, maybe employment. And then you go to get a SIN number, a birth certificate, a driver's license, right? You want to get a job. Well, now you have all these unpaid tickets that prevent you from doing that. And all of a sudden there's another barrier where you were never able to pay them in the first place. So I do want to pivot a little bit to talk about those supports, right? We're big proponents of the housing first model, the idea that when somebody's homeless, the first thing you've got to do is get them into a house, get them into an apartment, into a stable situation. And from there, the other supports can come. But we're losing affordable housing at a crazy rate here in Ottawa. We're not building nearly enough new affordable housing. What's your stance on that, and what do you think we can do about it?
Well, I will say this. There is no simple solution to the housing problem. And I say that not because someone has been, but just from someone watching. I would say, for example, that I heard, I think it was Smart Prosperity Ottawa, it's an organization, talking about our official plan, talking about building 7,500 homes. And they said that's not nearly enough. So we need about 10,000 homes. So we're already behind the eighth ball. I want to see, you know, the average home in Ottawa is right now is about 800,000. In Gatineau, 400 and something thousand. And I think we should be closer to Gatineau figure, because in 2003, it was about 350,000 average home. So when we look fast forward how many years, I can't remember, maybe 13 years or whatever, wages have gone up. So the average wage was 53,000 at that time. So now, even if we say the average wage is 60,000 or whatever it is, it's just about a 10% jump. But within that same time, homes have jumped more than 100%.
Right.
So I recognize that, and you probably wonder why am I spending so much time on that? It's because I think what is driving a lot of the loss of the affordable homes is the rapid rise. And so everybody wants to make money on it. You know, they're kicking out tenants. So we're losing rental spaces. And it's almost like you have to twist arms to get to build affordable housing. So for sure, what we have to do is find a way and see what the rules are to set a percentage of every development. What percentage must go to affordable housing? So if government is not involved, I see there's no incentive for the private sector to create affordable housing. But as a people, you know, we've got to recognize that, you know, I believe that to whom much is given, you know, much is expected. So we cannot just focus on, I cannot just say as mayor, I want to reduce the average cost to purchase a home, because there's some people who are not in that space to be able to purchase a home. So what I've got to say is we also have to reduce homelessness. And by the way, I think that it is a stain on us morally that there is a wait list to get into a drug treatment program. I think that to me is unacceptable. I think we should of course, do more on prevention. And so when it comes to homelessness, I'm not saying that there is a you know, quick and simple and easy solution, but I think, and here's how I think, we have to have targets. We can't wait till every election time and this is it. So what I can commit to is whether it be weekly or bi-weekly meetings, at a minimum, bi-weekly, because this is housing is a major issue. Meetings with a task force, and where we track the metrics, how we're doing on homelessness, how we're doing on the cost of, you know, the average homes, how we're doing on new building starts. And I can just tell you, just me personally, I'm not looking for big homes. I have no problem if people want to spend, $2 million in a home, whatever it is, big lawns and that sort of. I don't have a problem. I'm not anti-rich,
Right.
okay. But what I would like to see, to me, having a townhouse with a small yard, I kind of see that if you're a young family and you've got kids, or a new Canadian, or young, you just enter the workforce. I kind of see that as a human right, you know. So if in 2003, making 53K per year, you could buy a townhouse. So today you can't,
Right.
even making 60,000. So that is a big problem. So I want to have a task force. I want us to meet bi-weekly and see how well we're doing. And part of the metrics we have to track is how we're doing on affordable housing,
Yeah.
increasing that, and helping get people off homelessness.
Yeah. House prices are just the craziest thing to me, right? I was looking the other day, a house went up for sale on the street I grew up in. I grew up in Mechanicsville, and I think my parents bought that house in 1971 for $35,000 or something, right? And
Yeah.
I would not be able to afford, if I were given that house, I could not afford to live there. I couldn't afford the property tax. I couldn't afford the hydro bills. I could not afford to live in that house anymore, because it's all of a sudden worth $1 million or some crazy number where you go like, how did that even happen, right?
Yeah.
And so everyone sort of gets priced out of the neighborhood that they grew up in, as I don't want to call it gentrification, but it really is, I think, in that area, right? And so all of a sudden now you have families who have nowhere to go. And if they can't afford or can't find that rental place and can't get into it, well, then we have another homeless family. We have another homeless person. And, it kind of snowballs. Now, you did mention something I wanted to touch on, which is wait lists for drug treatment centers. I think that is a big issue as well, right? And I think one of the ways that we can approach that as a city is to look at drug abuse and drug use and all of those things as public health issues rather than as criminal issues. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Harm reduction, right? Safe injection sites, all of these things that go toward reducing the amount of harm that drugs do on our streets, given the idea that there's no way that we're going to eradicate drugs from the streets of Ottawa in,
Mm-hmm.
our near future anyway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that again, like I said, I think one of the jobs of any good leader is to have a vision. I I don't believe that there's no problem without a solution. The solution might be difficult, but there is no problem that cannot be solved. Um, on the whole, and I know there's a lot of debate about harm reduction and all of that. And what I would simply say is this: to me, harm reduction should not be an end in itself. It should be a means to an end. So we should never give up on anyone. And to me, if we make harm reduction an end in itself, then what we're doing is we're giving up on the fact that someone could be, you know, contributing, in life and all of that. And so, okay.
Sorry, just choked on my coffee, and then my dog started barking, so I had to mute myself.
That's okay. I understand. So for example, and I'm not saying that I'm obviously not the expert in these issues. You guys are the experts, but the sort of thoughts that roam through my head is that in some cases we might need what we call supportive housing, where even though people are living in an apartment unit or in housing, and by the way, all housing does not have to be in the urban center. I think that this is just me thinking that I think there's something therapeutic about living on a farm.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we have involved the agricultural community in part of it coming up with solutions? Because we have corporate sponsors.
Yeah. Oh,
And
I'll
a
tell
lot
you
of,
this. Oh, sorry. I'll tell you this. We just started a program at Operation Come Home in partnership with the LiveX Alliance, which is a group of people with lived experience of homelessness who have created this group. And they do equine therapy. So there's a farm outside of Ottawa where they have horses, and the youth get to go out there, interact with the horses, spend time on the farm. You know, for a long time, we ran an actual farm ourselves at Operation Come Home called Farm Works, where the youth would get out there and, you know, pull the weeds and plant the radishes, and then we sell them locally, you know, local produce. So there, I agree with you. There's really something about getting outside and getting in that atmosphere that's very therapeutic and very helpful.
Mhm. And so no, that's very nice to hear. And I certainly see the city partnering with your organization to a higher level with some of the initiatives that your organization is involved in. Because, like I said, we cannot, as a society, accept any level of homelessness. But I do recognize that, it has to be voluntary. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that it's easy and that the supports are there.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a huge priority because no matter who we are as a society, we're measured by how we treat the least. So this is my opinion.
Yeah, now I'm running out of time here. I've got about 8 minutes left, so I have one more question. And this just popped up, and I came across this today, right? Yeah. There's the mayor's race, but there are a bunch of other things you vote for at the same time, city councilors and so on, and school boards. And at Operation Come Home, one of the most prevalent groups is LGBTQ youth, right? We have more lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer youth in Operation Come Home than in the regular population. And in fact, our employment program, we recently did a survey, 40% of the youth who use our employment programs are LGBTQ+. And now we've got a few people who are running for school board here in Ottawa, and the only ones who seem to be making the news, right? It's all about name recognition, and the names are getting out there, are running on a very hardcore anti-trans platform. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts on that are. Certainly it's something it impacts adults, but the youth that we serve are going to be more impacted just by that rhetoric than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny, and you learned something new every day. I didn't know that, and those are pretty serious statistics that you say 40% of youth from the LGBTQ2+ community. And I think that what we have to do as a society is recognize that everyone is different. And we have to give people space to express themselves how they wish. We don't live in a totalitarian society where everybody must be one way. So I think that as a society, what we've got to do is be as supportive as possible. I'm not sure what the root causes are. I'd be surprised if parents are asking children to leave the home, but
that is the root cause. That's the biggest root cause. Yeah. And this is one of the reasons that I find this so alarming. And I don't blame you for not knowing, because I just came across this today myself. But the platform really is, I'm going to run for school board on the platform that we have to stop teaching children that these differences exist, right? And that is a terrible message, especially the youth that we see, right? Our LGBTQ youth that come to us are there because their parents will not accept them at home. And anything that stops educating people about that is only going to make that worse, I think.
Well, I guess you've given me another food for thought because I'm surprised. I could not. I do not understand. Anyways, I'm surprised that any parent would kick their child out of the house. I mean, even for example, this is an extreme example. I'm not making a comparison or anything, but even mass murderers, the last person there is the mother going to the jail and taking food, and this. I mean, so not that I know any mass murderer. I'm just from the movies and all of that, and I assume that movies reflect real life. So I'm surprised that any parent will kick their child out of the house.
Well, I would say, I would just say, I would say it's not always a parent kicking the child out. Very often, right, a child identifies as transgender, right? Grew up a boy, transitioning to a girl, like, I'm definitely female, and the parent creates an atmosphere in the house where that's not tolerated, and we don't talk about that. And, no, you're not, and that sort of thing, right? So the environment at home becomes so hostile to that person that they leave of their own accord, right? So maybe they're not kicked out and that sort of thing, but it is a home environment that's no longer tenable.
Yes, okay, so I understand that. I understand that a bit better now. Well, all I can simply say is that I've just found in life that society is a very complex place. And there are a variety of opinions. And what we have to do is find a way to live together in spite of all the variety of opinions. I don't believe in how do you say, demonizing or stigmatizing anyone. We've got to all live together and support one another and love each other. We can't force everybody to have the same points of view, but what we can do is treat each other with respect and with love. I can tell you, for example, just to give an extreme example, I'm a politician. I've been involved in a political party before, and they didn't let me run, or whatever the case, that's another long story. But would I be okay having a white supremacist as part of my political party? Yes. You know why? There are thousands of people who have that opinion. So from a practical point of view, I disagree with their ideology. I would like to debate them. And I think that by meeting me, they might find out that, there's some things that we agree on, some things we don't agree on. But I'm just saying, and you probably shock you to hear what I'm saying, but I'm just saying that I've looked at it because there's a rise, when, we've had the trucker conflict, there's a rise, but there's millions of people who think in a certain way, and they're still Canadians. So what I've got to do, and I would expect anyone in public office, any parent, anyone, school board trustee, any teacher, is to understand that there will always be different views. But how do we find a way, how they say, to disagree without being disagreeable? Yeah. Because there are millions of people with these views. So that I'm not saying that I have the solution, but in my mind, I know, and I use the trucker example because I hear lots of rhetoric. I don't support the occupation, don't get me wrong. But a lot of the way people talk, it's almost like we forget that these are also human beings too. So I took a vaccine, but they disagree. Okay, now because they disagree, am I then going to say they should not exist? Anyways, I'm trying to express myself, but I don't know if I'm expressing myself.
No, all good, makes sense. I got like 30 seconds left, and this is going to cut us off super rudely because I'm cheap and I have the free Zoom, so it'll do that. But just before you go, I just want to make sure, if your campaign attracted the support of white supremacists, that would give you pause, yes? That would make you think, wait, hang on a second, I might be doing something wrong?
Absolutely.